I've been stuck at the Youth with Psychic Abilities facility since I was 12. On Christmas Eve, I managed to get out.
Disclaimer: the content presented in this video is purely fictional and intended for entertainment purposes only.
DisastrousInvolvedI.
I was playing cards with Ethan, a pyrokinetic and a sore loser. That asshole kept burning the cards to ashes every time I won. Ethan, designated as category red, was the closest thing I had to a friend. He was a big dude with a surprisingly bigger heart, an ex-high school jock who had become my roomie 2 years prior. I could tell he'd been popular, probably from an affluent family, so he likely wasn't staying long. They brought him in one night, kicking and screaming, and strapped him to the bed opposite mine. For the first few weeks, Ethan wasn't allowed to use his hands. He sat cross-legged on his bed and told me how he'd set his entire town alight. Okay, entire town was an exaggeration. He later admitted it was just a movie theater, and his school locker, sitting in the cremated remnants of his Letterman jacket, with his thick brown hair and freckles. He looked like the textbook boy next door. I thought he'd be harder to talk to, but he was oddly talkative. At first, I thought it was the drugs they force-fed him, but then he became obsessed with telling me his life story. Apparently, he'd accidentally burnt his girlfriend's eyes out at prom, which somehow led to him going full pyro. I know, I told him it was extra. I admit, I was initially pretty scared of the guy. It's not exactly brainwashing, but the moment we're brought into the facility and categorized as lower levels, blue, indigo, and violet, we're taught to steer clear of kids categorized at higher levels. Those are the ones who need to be muzzled and collared. Pyros like Ethan and kids like Carlisle, the girl in the room next to mine, Emma, who could teleport. Emma was mostly mute. She was also really bad at chess. Carlisle was a speaker, capable of bringing her own words to life, and super powerful. For all of her 17 years on Earth, she told her guard he was suffering from a brain hemorrhage, and seconds later, he was. Carlisle wasn't just being held at the YWPA because of her ability. She was being protected from world leaders and other ne'er-do-wells who could easily use her for their own personal gain behind closed doors. Kids like Carlisle and Ethan were the lost causes. Here 1 minute, gone the next. I half expected Ethan to disappear one day while I was being tested on, or forcing down mystery meat that passed as cafeteria food, but it had been almost 2 years, and Pyro Boy was still my roommate. I was category blue, a high-level telekinetic, so it's not like we could relate to each other. Ethan was more likely to be executed at 18 due to the severity of his case. But weirdly enough, I enjoyed his company. Just like school, the YWPA had a social hierarchy. Blues, who were most likely to be recruited for some shady government program, were at the top. JJ and Alex, lower-level blues, had already invited me to join their little gang, but I wasn't interested in their weird obsession with becoming soldiers. I'd been brought in at 12, those kids had been at the YWPA since birth, never seeing sunlight and being subtly conditioned to enjoy the idea of becoming mindless drones for some higher power. Those types of kids were noticeably more feral and animal-like, baring their teeth when guards grabbed them for daily testing. JJ was already giving me cult leader vibes. Instead of being scared of his ability, he embraced it. Meanwhile, I had a feeling the mandatory Friday classes for low-level blues were screwing with their brains, maybe even prepping them for recruitment. Luckily, I was able to avoid it. It wasn't easy at first, but the second I was dragged into a classroom-like setting, with an ancient analog television at the front, I knew my fate. It was part of being recruited. After all, people in the real world weren't interested in non-compliant telekinetics, they wanted brainless shells. There was only one way of getting out of mandatory classes, which were either life lessons for the rare occasion that you would be released, or plain fucking brainwashing. I had no choice but to play the unhinged card, which was risky and could either end with me getting executed or sent to therapy. So in the cafeteria, I staged a breakdown, pinning several kids to the ceiling. I was taken down almost immediately, of course, and thankfully, instead of military training in my schedule, I had psychokinetic therapy. So, instead of being subjected to what I could only guess was some seriously messed up shit, judging by the rapid decline in the blues' humanity, I sat in a room with my personal therapist, who taught me how to manage my power and not abuse it. Speaking of the other blues, they started being more annoying than usual, sitting at their usual table embedded in a game of silent chess, which was chess, but nobody talked, and each member used their ability instead of their hands. This kind of information has been nailed into my brain since my imprisonment inside the YWPA. So I know the nitty-gritty of the category blue. When you're categorized as blue, you can either be a low level or a high level. Low levels can do simple telekinesis, which is moving or controlling an object or organic matter with their mind. High levels, however, can extend their ability to the brain. That's one of the reasons why blues are so popular in recruitment. Whereas low levels are wanted for their simple ability to move objects, high levels are in demand for their ability to control minds, like influencing or erasing memories, and in some cases, managing a complete takeover of the original organic personality. As a high level, I knew my day was coming sooner or later. I couldn't fully master what we called influence yet, but I did successfully manage to push my instructor to punch me in the face, and then erase his memory of performing that action, which meant I was extremely close to being recategorized at a higher level. Which meant re-evaluation. It was Tuesday, which was a free day. Nepo babies were allowed monitored time with their parents, while the rest of us had to keep up appearances in front of the elites, pretending we were having the best time ever and definitely weren't being prodded and tested on. I mean, if these people were as perceptive as they thought, they'd notice the bloodstains. Right, the Velcro straps on every bed. The execution room, which was just one big industrial furnace. Every time someone was burned alive, the YWPA played Taylor Swift at full volume. When I was 13, I was being dragged back to my room in cuffs after standardized testing. I remember the right side of my body was numb and my nose was bleeding, beads of warm red dripping down my chin. It itched as it dried, but I couldn't do much about it. The drugs were already destabilizing my limbs, making it impossible to run, my vision swimming in and out of focus. All I could see were clinical white walls crashing into me like ocean waves. I wasn't expecting to hear Taylor Swift. I can't remember what song it was, just the same lyrics repeating as I was dragged down the hallway toward a bright orange blur. Move, my guard ordered, shoving me forward. That song followed me all the way back to my room. When I was freed from my cuffs and shoved inside, I laid down and pretended I couldn't hear the agonizing screams from adjacent cells slicing through those lyrics. I had pretty much accepted my fate as either ending up in there, being fucking barbecued to an upbeat pop song, or joining my fellow blues as a military drone. I didn't even fucking dream of walking out of the YWPA on my own 2 feet, with my mind intact. At least, Christmas in the YWPA was about as fun as you would expect. There was a single Christmas tree themed sticker on the wall for a decoration. But I wasn't even sure if some kids even knew what Christmas was. Jessa, who was executed 3 days after her arrival, asked JJ if he wanted to do a Secret Santa, and the boy looked at her like she was crazy. Jessa was another scary one, a category gray. Her ability was similar to a speaker, but on a mass scale. So, you can imagine how fucking terrifying she was, but she didn't look scary, she looked harmless. Jessa was tiny with orange pigtails and a gentle smile. As cute and innocent as she looked though, Jessa could obliterate our universe if she wanted to. She could also prevent war if she wanted to. The rumor mill churned, and I heard from an indigo that Jessa had snapped her own family out of existence, but Jessa used her power for small things. She wanted a puppy, and bam, there was one in her lap. She wanted a swimming pool, and suddenly, a whole new indoor pool hall just appeared at the end of the first floor. She was both a miracle and a curse, and I don't think the YWPA trusted her, and others were out there hunting her down. Jessa was only there for 3 days, but it left an impression. The swimming pool, for example. It's not like we could use it, but it was still there. The white plastic seat where she'd sat cross-legged, eagerly asking people's names, sat sadly empty. Back to the card game. I was losing patience with Ethan, who thought burning my cards would make him a winner. The worst part is, he was actually making me laugh. Shooting me a grin every time my queen burst into flames. It was funny the first few times, but was getting progressively less entertaining. He was like, "Ha! Look how funny this is." I laughed the first few times, but by the 8th time, I was questioning his maturity. When the large metal doors to the rec room flew open, Ethan flinched, his gaze glued to his half-cremated deck of cards. He was about to turn the big 1-8, which meant his evaluation was soon execution, or, if they were feeling merciful, maybe a resentencing until he was 25. I kicked him under the table when he didn't lay down his cards. Ethan kicked me back, his eyes growing frenzied. "Fuck," he whispered, his gaze dropping to the table. "I bet they've come for me." I kicked him again, this time reassuringly. "You're still 17, dumbass." "Yeah, but not for long." I raised a brow. "Why would they kill you at 17? He curled his lip. "Because they're assholes." Leaning across the shitty fold-out table, I fixed him with a smile. "What if you're fireproof?" "Fireproof? All right, listen up." The voice snapped me out of it. Twisting around, Warden Carrington stood in the doorway, twirling a pair of metal cuffs. She was a stiff, narrow-bodied woman with a blonde topknot and a permanent grin. She took pleasure in escorting kids to be executed. Something sour crept up my throat. Is that what this was? No, executions were usually private tests. Maybe I was used to mandatory ones every Friday. That's what the cuffs were usually for. We were taken from the rec room individually, cuffed, and dragged to the testing rooms. But it wasn't Friday, the floors were too clean. I was used to blood seeping across tiles on a testing day, I wasn't allowed to look the warden in the eye as a blue, but I managed a risque glance. She was smiling suggestively, so it had to be an execution. Realization crept in then, that the slight curl on her lip suggested exactly the opposite, recruitment. I scanned the room. 15 fearful faces stared at her. A willowy blonde who had previously been reading a book was now sitting up straight, her half-lidded eyes wide, almost awake. She caught my gaze, lips pricking into a smile. Slowly, the girl inclined her head, a single blonde curl falling into her eyes. She ran her index finger across her throat, mouthing, "We're fucked." Could it be Matthews? My gaze flicked to the brunette curled up in the corner of the room. Carlisle? I used to talk to her, we were from the same town, so we had that mutual connection, but something happened to her after a testing session, and since then, Carlisle shut everyone else out and isolated herself. Matthews was immortal, and Carlisle had the power to end the world. I doubted either of them were being recruited. The holidays came early, kids. Warden Carrington mocked, and I sensed the group of us all holding a collective breath. Jay. She boomed. You're getting out of here. There was an awkward silence before Ethan kicked me. Bro, that's you. He was right. Slowly, I got to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest. I was Jay, which was crazy, because the only kids who made it out of the YWPA alive were either Nepo babies or. My excitement started to wither once I'd hugged Ethan a quick goodbye and offered Carlisle a sympathetic smile. I thought, just for a moment, that maybe my mom had come to get me finally, after 5 years. But my mother was dead. I watched a man who called himself Mr. Yellow blow her brains out with a smile. Before kneeling in front of me, I was standing in my mother's blood, watching slow-spreading crimson seeping across her favorite rug. "Hey, there, little guy," he said, his eyes maniacal, grin widening. "Do you want to come to a super special place?" The super special place was obviously the YWPA. I didn't even get to fucking mourn my mother, and to everyone in the outside world, 12-year-old me had murdered my mom. The outside world has no idea about our abilities, or the YWPA, so, to them, I was yet another psycho kid. There were only 2 ways to get out of YWPA, in a body bag, or the other way, the one I dreaded. Warden Carrington was smiling with way too many teeth when I slowly made my way over to her. She grabbed my arms, linking them behind my back and cuffing me. "You've been recruited." I was dragged out the door and down the hallway. At the end, surprisingly, stood a guy, around college age. He was tall, a pair of Ray-Bans pinning back dark blonde hair, wearing a long trench coat that hung off his slim frame. In his hand was a small paper bag he was swinging excitedly. The closer I was getting, being unceremoniously pushed forward by the warden, the guy's swinging became more and more eager. I was convinced he was going to accidentally fling the bag in my face. I wasn't expecting to be recruited by a teenager resembling Sherlock Holmes. "Hi." He greeted me, genuinely excited to see me. The boy motioned for the warden to uncuff me, and she did, making sure to keep hold of my arms, her bony fingers pricking into my flesh. "It's great to finally see you in person. I've been trying to get you out of here for weeks. But there's so much paperwork, and blah, blah, blah." It was a whole mess. He rolled his eyes, "But here you are." His southern accent was already irritating. He grabbed my shoulders with teary eyes like I was a stray fucking cat he had just adopted. "You're Jay, right?" "I'm Nathaniel." He held out the bag, and I caught the unmistakable smell of fried food. "Do you want 5 Guys?" Warden Carrington cleared her throat. "Not in here," she drawled, "the smell will wake up Will." Will was a higher level category yellow, a shifter. But I fully understood why. Werewolf. Apparently, he'd been sacrificed during his frat's hazing ritual, gaining the ability to shift his flesh to a dog-like beast, as well as adapting a liking for human flesh. There were 2 incidents with Will, and both of them ended in him cannibalizing at least 3 inmates. Nathaniel looked intrigued, but he kept his mouth shut. I was handed a fresh set of clothes to change into, before being shoved through the main doors. I couldn't believe I was actually breathing in real, ice-cold air. I could feel it tickling my cheeks, blowing my hair out of my eyes. In the real world, I stuck out like an anomaly in my clinical white shorts and tee. I was standing on concrete, uneven and gritty beneath my shitty Converse. Twisting around, I stared up at the YWPA, a looming glass building. We were in the middle of nowhere. I hadn't noticed on my way into YWPA because I was blindfolded. Nathaniel pointed across the parking lot. There was only one car, and it was his, an expensive, sleek-looking Range Rover. I tried to jump into the back, but he patted the passenger seat. Nathaniel slid into the driver's side. "So, there are, like, actual werewolves in that place?" I shot him a look, resisting the urge to roll my eyes. I didn't know why he was fascinated with werewolves when there were kids in there who could snap us out of existence if they were slightly annoyed. Well, there's Will, I said, shrugging. Then there's the leader of their pack. He looked intrigued. So, these kids are like, what, original werewolves? He snorted. That's what was in the report. Yeah, I said. Will told me, his eyes widened. Wait, so like real werewolves? When I didn't reply, he blew a raspberry. Damn. Keeping me on edge. I like it. Slipping onto the warm leather seats, my muscles started to relax. I was so used to the harsh, shitty plastic chairs in the YWPA rec room, and then there were the bloodstained metal gurneys I had to sit on during testing. But this was an actual seat. I had missed cars. I'd missed being able to sink into cushions. To relax, Nathaniel started the car, cranking up the radio. Taylor Swift. He shot me a grin, reaching into the back and grabbing the bag of Five Guys. Hungry? I ate the burger in 2 bites and almost choked on the soda. Dude, Nathaniel chuckled, side-eyeing me. The food isn't going to run away. Asshole, I started inhaling the fries, ignoring his little jab. I can understand, though. Of course you're fucking hungry, Nathaniel said, his gaze flicking to the road ahead. I couldn't resist pressing my head against the window, slurping my Coke. The vivid red and orange blur of traffic flying past was making me carsick. I know what goes on inside that place. The inhumane shit they do to kids like you. Kids like me. I stopped chugging, a sour bite to my tone. He sighed. You know that's not what I meant. Sure. I caught his expression darken significantly, his fingers tightening around the wheel. I'm sorry, Jay, he said, his tone cracking slightly. For what those assholes did to you. I fought to get you out of that place. He scoffed. They kept trying to shove another kid in my face, but I told them it was either you or I was out of there. Why me? I didn't turn around to look at him. My gaze stuck to blurry holiday lights flying past us. They were too bright in contrast to the darkening sky. Nathaniel didn't respond. Cranking up the radio, I wasn't buying this guy's friendly act. I had a hard time believing his save the children bullshit. So, what do you need me for? I asked, making myself comfy, throwing my legs up on the dashboard. Construction? Did your cat get stuck up a tree? Nope. His lips curled into a smirk. Do you know what day it is? I gestured to an illuminated snowman outside, Easter. I deadpanned, and he broke into giggles. I'm sorry, how old are you? He spluttered, 17. I said. 18, in January. He snorted. I'm actually 16. You're not. I am. I just look older because of the trench coat and shades. He shot me a grin. And it's clearly working. Dude. You totally thought I was, like, a junior in college. Nathaniel sighed, leaning back in his seat. I'd been told I have a baby face, so I dress like a boomer. This guy was making it hard for me to not like him, but I was taken off guard when he drove me to the airport. Nathaniel threw his jacket over my shoulders, looking me up and down. All right, you're good. He ruffled my hair. Luckily for you, kids our age literally wear anything. So, yes, you may look like you've been institutionalized, but my coat gives you a hipster vibe, you know? I had no idea what he was talking about. He sounded like an Animal Crossing character. I don't have an ID, I managed to hiss out when he pulled me into the airport. It was surprisingly quiet for Christmas Eve. I expected to be questioned about my lack of passport and identity, but Nathaniel, despite his age and lack of maturity, could easily pull me right through security with a flash of his badge. He gestured to a nearby coffee store, handing over way too many bills for a drink, flat white, and a bottle of water, he said hurriedly, swiping through his phone. Feel free to go crazy. Get as much as you want. I had almost $500 pressed into my palm, so, yes, I went crazy. I almost turned and ran, taking the cash with me, but my mom was dead. There was no home to go back to. I bought a double chocolate brownie hot cocoa to go. And turkey and stuffing sub, devouring both of them before I even left the store. Nathaniel was waiting for me. He sipped his flag white, leading me straight past the gate. When a guard stepped in front of us, he shot them a smile. It's cool, we're exceptions, he said. The guard paused before nodding and stepping aside. Have a good flight, boys. His lips broke out into a grin. Oh, and happy holidays. Nathaniel winked at the man, smirking. You too, Bobby. I couldn't resist opening my mouth. How did you? Nathaniel just grinned. I was expecting first-class seats, but instead, I was ushered onto a private jet, so Nathaniel was rich. I had a bed as a seat. I slept for most of the flight, dreaming I was back in the YWPA, back on my blood-stained mattress counting ceiling tiles. So, how is it? Ethan loomed over me with his arms folded. The startling white of his shorts and tee made my eyes hurt. I didn't blink, stretching out my stiff legs. His voice was kind of muffled. It's okay, I guess, I said. I had 5 guys. Ethan pulled a face, tipping his head back. Ugh. Don't. I'm pretty sure they gave us recycled slop for dinner. I rolled onto my side. Was it the chef's special macaroni and cheese? Yep. Ethan curled his lip. They're trying to kill us with the food. I nodded, enjoying my ex-roommate's company, though I wasn't sure why he was pacing up and down. The second I'd built up this guy's trust, I'll get you guys out of there. I felt my heart squeeze, and I swallowed sour-tasting puke. Before you turn 18. I'll get you out of there. Ethan frowned, leaning closer, his brows furrowed like bugs. I blinked rapidly, like tiny wiggling little furry bugs. Dude. I was pretty sure there weren't supposed to be 2 Ethans. The 2 Ethans leaned forward. Can't you smell that? I could. It was potent, like bleach, suffocating my throat. Ethan jerked back, his eyes were wide. That smells like, reality slammed into me, but my eyes were glued shut. I knew exactly what it smelled like. I didn't even remember getting off of the plane. I woke up, groggy, in the back of an SUV, my mouth full of metallic ick. I tried to move, and I couldn't, my arms reduced to sausages. I thought back to the water I sipped on the plane. How it tasted a little too bitter. Did you drug me? I managed to get out in a hiss. I couldn't even panic. My body was paralyzed, my chest heaving, my heavy pants into thick leather seats were suffocating me. Nathaniel's laugh sounded like waves crashing into my skull. The car took a sharp turn, and I almost tumbled off of the seat. It's just a small job, Jay, he said. We're counting on you. It took all my strength to drag myself to the window. I could see my breath coming out in clouds of white. Tiny white flurries dancing across the pane. Snow. The drugs were fucking with my head. I slipped in and out of consciousness, dancing between the living and the dead. Ethan was sitting next to me, his head pressed against the window. How do you even get out of shit like this? He tried the door, slamming his fists against the door. Locked, he said. I managed a spluttered laugh. No shit. I caught myself. What the fuck do I do? Ethan shrugged, his gaze glued to the snowstorm. Maybe try diving out of the car? When it's locked. Before I could lecture Ethan on basic common sense, the real world slammed into me in waves of ice water. Literally, someone had opened my door. And I could feel the wind chill grazing the back of my neck. I opened my eyes when 2 muscled arms wrapped around me and yanked me out of the car. I couldn't stand, immediately falling limp in his grasp. Come on, Jay, Nathaniel's voice tickled my ear. We're nearly there. I wasn't sure where there was. I was up to my knees in snow, blurred white closing in on me from every angle. With my body immobile, Nathaniel dragging me felt fucking dehumanizing. He forced my head up, but it kept hanging, my thoughts dancing, my eyes flickering. It's a simple job, he said when I was more awake. In front of me was something. It reminded me of a warehouse, a towering structure that almost looked like it was part of the storm. Nathaniel pulled me further, chuckling. When I parted my lips to cry out, he promptly slammed his hand over my mouth. Do the job well, Jay, and we'll think about taking you on full time. We reached a garage-like door, and with the click of a button, it was slowly gliding upwards. To my surprise, this place reminded me of a lounge. There was a desk, a short blonde wearing a Christmas hat sitting behind a laptop. Nate. She deadpanned, her gaze stuck to the laptop screen. Did you get him? No, Stella, Nathaniel's tone pricked with sarcasm. As you can see, I definitely don't have him. The girl nodded slowly. Cool. She said. Good talk. Ignoring Stella, Nathaniel pulled me into an elevator. When the doors slid shut, I found my voice, pulling from his grasp, but my body was stiff and wrong. I dropped to my knees, shuffling back. What is this place? The boy didn't answer, leaning against the door, his lips curled into a smirk. It's a super special place. Something sickly crept up my throat. He was mimicking Mr. Yellow's words, my mother's murderer. When the elevator slid open with a loud groan, the first thing I saw was intense clinical white light. The room reminded me of a surgical theater that had long since been abandoned, flickering lights swinging overhead. I saw the first splatter of blood on the floor right in front of my feet. I've grown desensitized to blood over the years. But this was more than a splatter, a dark crimson streak trailing all the way to the center of the room. There were 4 plastic chairs positioned in a circle. When I glimpsed Velcro restraints hanging off of the armrests, I felt my body start to twist and contort in a desperate attempt to escape. 2 chairs were occupied by kids my age, metal helmets strapped to their heads, a strawberry blonde girl with her head bowed, her lips and chin stained scarlet. She was limp in the restraints. Her body hanging forward. Opposite her was a guy, slumped over, hiding behind thick brown curls. There was a growing pool of red stemming around him. When he lifted his head, I had to fight back a cry. The guy's eyes were pearly white, half-lidded, all of the color drained from his iris. I recognized it. I had only ever heard of a kid's power burning out through word of mouth. I had been taught that our abilities were like a muscle, and like a muscle, you could strain it. The first symptom of burnout was losing all the color in your eyes, but this guy was in the later stages. Judging by seeping red oozing from every orifice, he had already suffered multiple hemorrhages. My gaze found the helmet on his head. They kept bringing him back, forcing his body to revive again and again, purging his power for all it had. His lips were cracked, slick scarlet. I couldn't tell what ability he possessed. Or his level. Just that he was suffering. You've gotta be fucking kidding me, he sobbed. Lucas, it's Christmas. Nathaniel mockingly scolded. I told you about profanity. Go fuck yourself. Nathaniel forced me to stand. All right, introductions. He said cheerfully, guys, this is Jay. The strawberry blonde jolted in her chair, but she couldn't lift her head. He's going to be helping us today. I cringed away when he patted me on the back. Jay. This is Luke and Tori. High-level blues, and my favorite little helpers. Nathaniel shoved me into a chair, a metal helmet forced onto my head. Nathaniel knelt in front of me, his eyes sparkling. Insanity, I thought dizzily. But there was something beyond that, a darkness shrouded in his eyes that he didn't want me to see. He pinned my wrists to the armrests, offering me a smile. Your job, he murmured in my ear. Is my old job. He straightened up. You see, we kept failing. His expression twisted. Every fucking year we failed, and more of us died. We couldn't do it. No matter how hard we tried, none of us were strong enough. I fought back, and with a simple twist of his wrist, my body was paralyzed. He was strong, I was the best we had. Nathaniel sighed. They took me from the YWPA in Vancouver. I was just a kid. 8, maybe? I was dragged inside this room, forced into one of these fucking chairs. And my brain was fried over and over again, until I was numb. He choked out a hysterical giggle. I stopped feeling pain around the 10th or 12th time those bastards brought me back. But it was okay, because I could do it. I was the only one who could fucking do it, so why not use me for all I have? Was he crying? Nathaniel swiped at his eyes with his sleeve, forcing a smile. Anyway, then the demand grew, and it was suddenly so much fucking harder to control, or even lift off the ground. I was tortured in an attempt to strengthen my power, but I couldn't do it. I guess you could say I wasn't strong enough. Nathaniel's smile widened. But you guys are. He started to clap. So much stronger than me. I mean, you're amazing. Luke, who turned his family into his personal minions. You truly have a gift. I could hear the envy dripping from his tongue. The blonde let out a whimper, her bound hands jerking. His gaze found mine. Jay. He said. What you did to get yourself in the YWPA was quite remarkable. Honestly, I bowed down to you. Please. Luke whispered, spitting blood on the floor. I can't do .it. Well, guess what? It's your lucky day, Lucas, because you have help now. Nathaniel danced over to him, patting his helmet. When the boy lunged at him, he spluttered. Ooh, bad dog. What did I fucking say about using your teeth? Lucas didn't respond, and I noticed the glint in Nathaniel's eyes. He wasn't just crazy. This asshole reveled in being in control. Sue, over the last few years, we've always focused on movement, he twisted around, winking at me. Now that, my fellow freaks, was a big mistake. A large wooden contraption was dragged in, because why focus on movement? Nathaniel continued. When we have something even better? I recognized what it was, the holiday lights strung across the back seat, the back, filled with sacks overflowing with wrapped gifts and toys, but something told me this was a front for something far darker, okay? Nathaniel shouted to someone above us. Let's do a test run, alright? Everyone in position? Nate. Tori's strangled cry sliced through the silence. She whipped her head back, her eyes rolling back to pearly whites. You're going to kill us. Ignoring her, he turned to me. How many people have you taken over, Jay? Nathaniel came closer, his eyes narrowing, lips curving into a spiteful smile. How many minds can you force yourself inside? His question sent prickles of ice slipping down my spine. I hadn't answered that question in a long time. I was too scared to. I don't know, I managed to get out. Come on. Nathaniel cocked his head. Maybe. 1 million? He wagged his brows. 2 million? I didn't mean to, the words were choking my throat before I could stop them. I didn't realize how right the chair felt, the restraints. Until I was reminded that I really was a fucking monster, I was just a kid. Nathaniel's expression softened, his lip twisting. I know you were, he said, so was I when I told my pops to off himself. He frowned. Which begs the question, he hummed. You're a category blue at one of the highest levels, and yet the guys back at the YWPA decided not to toast you. It looked like he might continue, before a yell cut him off. Nate, we're all ready. It sounded like Stella, from upstairs. I just need your go-ahead. Nathaniel didn't respond for a moment. He slowly made his way over to me, fixing my helmet on my head, and checking my restraints. I thought he was sympathetic. Or maybe he was, in his own fucked up way. But then he was running his hands through my hair, grabbing a fistful, and forcing me to look at him. His eyes terrified me. Not because of his ability, or his descent into madness, but because somewhere, deep down, twisted and traumatized eyes filled with agony, I think part of him didn't even want to do this. What you did, Jay, he whispered, 15 years ago. I want you to do it again. Turning to the others, the boy grinned. How many children are on the planet? How many of them believe in the big guy? I didn't notice it at first, the pain. It was numb first, dull, like a phantom nothing dancing across my skull. It was like being hit by lightning an infinite number of times. Each one hit the back of my head, burning a hole inside it. I didn't realize I was screaming, crying, choking on my blood, begging for mercy. When I was a kid, it almost felt like drowning. I didn't feel pain, instead, a stark numbness taking hold of me, and the crushing weight of names, wishes, memories, thoughts, bleeding inside me. Back then, I barely grazed their minds, then I let go, plunging down, and awakening in my mother's arms. This time, I found each and every one. Ones that had grown up with me, and ones that were much younger, entangling myself with them. I could feel my brain coming apart, bleeding, running down my temples, and seeping down the back of my neck. 2.4 billion, Nathaniel said, that's 2.4 billion minds to give one simple, very subtle order, that they would never even know they were giving, just like when I was a kid. Fly, the word twisted on my lips, but that was more prominent inside my mind. Whatever was on my head, the helmet strapped to my skull, I could feel it molding itself to my spinal cord, a screech ripping from my lips. I was burning, suddenly, my brain igniting, my body jerking left and right. I could already feel wet warmth running from my nose, my lips, my ears, every vessel inside me coming apart, a neutron star collision dancing across the backs of my eyes. The command was already inside my head. Our heads, I could sense and feel, almost touch Luke's mind. Tori was harder, fading in and out, her body was already failing, already rejecting it. In front of me, the wooden contraption moved slightly, and Lucas's head dropped. When it started to hover, Tori's scream grew feral, animalistic, her cries growing into pleads, begging for death. The sleigh had taken flight, hovering above us, but I couldn't sense Luke anymore. That entangled string binding us together had been cut. Through half-lidded eyes, I think he was moving, his fingers still twitching under Velcro straps, but the sleigh was flying, and despite the agony ripping through me, my body slowly shutting down. My mouth became a smile. I was aware of my head going limp, all of me slumping, my head tipping back. That's right. Nathaniel's voice was fading. Make it FLYYYYYYYYYY. Yeah, I thought, unable to resist a spluttered giggle. I was making it fly, after 3 test runs, and then the real thing, spluttering on my last gasps of air. I was partially aware of Nathaniel lifting me from the chair and dumping my body somewhere cold, somewhere where the ice-cold chill was merciful on my soul. Dying felt weirdly comfortable, kind of like falling asleep. I always thought I would die on a surgical table, my body used for research, or burned to ashes in the incinerator. Almost death was cozy. I'm, like, really freaking warm. Ethan's voice pricked into my mind, and I found myself side by side with him. He was lying on something ice cold, his wrists strapped down. I didn't know what to say, so I rolled onto my back. Well, I'm pretty sure I'm dying. But you're dying in a cool way. Ethan chuckled. Driving freakin' Santa's sleigh. That's one hell of a way to go out, right? MMM. I said. Also, of hypothermia. I noticed where we were, sitting up, my head hitting the ceiling. Wherever we were was too narrow and claustrophobic. Fuck. I hissed, kicking the ceiling. Where are you? I'd rather not answer that, Ethan said, shooting me a sickly smile. Can we just talk? I pretended not to see the ignition of oranges getting brighter and brighter, closer and closer. Sure. I said, swallowing a cry. We can talk. Carlisle escaped today, he murmured, after a moment. So, expect the world to get a whole lot fucking crazier with her free. Those were words I really did not want to hear. Still, though. With Carlisle free, maybe anything was possible. The orange blur was growing bigger, and I squeezed my eyes shut. I had to wake up, to get out the snow. To live. Because I was going to freeze to death, but I didn't want to leave him. Merry Christmas, Jay, Ethan murmured, his wide smile erupting into raging fire melting the flesh from his bones. And happy fucking birthday to me. I thought I was going to die that night. I was ready to die with Ethan. Closing my eyes, I waited for the fire to engulf me. Before a flash, Emma had her arms wrapped around me. Her dark hair flew behind her, wide eyes determined. She told me to hold tight. I did, and the world around us blurred, my stomach jumping into my throat. When I opened my eyes, we were in a random field. Emma didn't even look at me. She threw me a coat, a scarf, and told me to get a move on. Apparently, she used to play in the field as a kid. It was considered her save point. It's been a month since I escaped the YWPA, 1 month since I stopped asking if Emma saved Ethan too. I think I know the answer. I saw a helicopter yesterday. Unmarked. Which means they're coming after us. So far, we've been surviving on scraps. Emma wants me to use my power to fuck with people, but I'm not doing it again. I'm terrified they're going to take me back there. Whatever I did on Christmas Eve, I'm not doing it again. Emma is weak. Her power can only take us so far. She's already taken me back to Santa's base twice. There's no sign of Luke or Tori, which means they've either been disposed of or are being used. According to sources at the YWPA, Ethan died on Christmas Eve. He was executed, but there's no trace of him, no ashes. This keeps me up all night. Because I saw him break apart. I saw his skin drip from his bones. I fucking saw Ethan die, so, if he's not dead, what happened to him?
Until next time, subscribe to stay up to date with all updates. No screamers or shocking moments, only comfort and safety. Bye.